Good evening. Good evening, and thank you for coming. The plan is to try to keep this as brief as possible for the presentation portion. We earmarked 50 minutes, and then we'll have opportunity for people to gather and talk individually with the pastoral council members. It's kind of interesting to see how stuff like this escalates rather quickly. This is intended for our parishioners, and the media catches hold of this, and pretty soon it's in the newspapers and on the TV. And I was slightly amused. Maybe you won't find the same amount of amusement, but this afternoon there was one done by JET, and they were saying this is a diocesan-sponsored event, which really it isn't per se. And they concluded to say this is the first of a number of meetings for the 3 parishioners. I hope it doesn't end up that that's all we have is 3 parishioners for follow-up meetings. I do wish to thank Father Phil as well as the Blessed Sacrament community for allowing us to use this facility. I think you'll agree it has a seating capacity, a decent sound system, and some wonderful technology available for us to use this evening. So we're greatly indebted to them for that, as well as the sense of neutrality for this gathering. I would like to start off by thanking you for the people that have sent in feedback. Our letter going out asked people to send in their comments and their questions in writing. And the reason for that is it really helps the pastoral council. So if we have it in writing, we can share it with one another, and we get many questions that are the same, some that are different, and it helps us, gives us a chance to compile this information so we know how to proceed the most effectively. Some of the questions may be answered this evening, many of them will not, for the simple reason that some of the questions we don't have answers for yet. This is a proposal, this is a work in progress type of thing that we're doing. So people are asking good questions that we simply do not know the answers to, and then there's many questions that we do know the answers to that we simply cannot cover in a timely meeting. So that's why we have follow-up meetings planned for this as we start off with. So the purpose of tonight is to give you an update of what the Pastoral Council has been working on for the last year, kind of bring you up to speed with what we're dealing with, give you a presentation with information, and then the follow-up meetings are to have listening sessions to say, how do we proceed given this information, and what is our collective ideas to move forward. So this evening we have graduate students here that are going to help us, but you've been handed pieces of paper with pencils. And so at the end of the presentation, each of our Pastoral Council members will be available for one-on-one conversations, but ultimately we want to make sure that whatever questions or comments or feedback that there is written down in some form so that they can compile it and we can make the best use of it. Because if we open it up for a Q&A in this size group, it's just going to turn ugly and we won't end on time. So the idea is to spread out the council members so you have an opportunity to talk to one of the 10 of us, and the students will be here to help compile the written information so we can move forward. Capiche? Good. I would first like to start off by introducing the actual Pastoral Council members. Even though we've put the names in the bulletin on numerous occasions, this evening they'll be wearing name tags so you can find them after the meeting. But we basically, on the council, we have Aaron Kerr, Evelyn Westman, Kate Fatter, Donna Carlino, John Prozogna, Phil Temple, Lisa Priestap, who's not here this evening, Jesse Hubert, Carol Pilitary, and Chuck Weindorf. Also, we've been working with Dr. Tanya Reese, who is a professor at Gannon University. She's been the facilitator for the past several months. The diocese has been encouraging parishes that are a partner to get a facilitator to kind of help with that process. So she's here this evening as well with some of her doctoral students to help in the process of taking feedback. We can do nothing, or we will do everything in vain if we do not do it with God. So I would like to start off with prayer. And most of you, not all of you, have been handed a sheet of paper that is kind of a cream color thing with a responsorial. When we get to the point where we're using that and we're praying antiphonally, this will be side 1 on the right. This will be side 2. And the side 3 people probably don't even have paper, so you're listening along prayerfully. Let us begin in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Lord, as you bring us together to consider your direction and plan, we ask you to fill us with your Spirit and to provide us with insight, to recognize your will in all of our efforts, to realize your guidance in all of our steps, and to follow your example in all of our works. May we bring to this effort the gifts you have bestowed on each one of us. May we affirm the gifts of those who are gathered with us, and may we experience greater blessings in our joint endeavors. As we gather in your name, may our vision be clear, may our work be fruitful, and may your presence be made known in all of our conversations. Amen. We have a short story that speaks to the power and necessity of vision. There was a leader in a certain Native American nation encamped at the base of a mountain who was dying. The leader summoned 3 persons from the nation and said, "I am dying, and one of you must succeed me as the head of our nation. I want each of you to climb our holy mountain and bring back something beautiful. The one whose gift is the most outstanding will succeed me." After several days, the 3 returned. The first brought a flower which grew near the summit, and it was extremely rare and beautiful. The second brought a stone which was smooth and round and had been polished by rain and sandy winds. The third one returned with empty hands. She said to the leader, I have brought nothing back to you. As I stood on top of the holy mountain, I saw that on the other side was a beautiful land filled with green pastures and a crystal lake. I have a vision of where our nation could go for a better life. I was so overwhelmed by what I saw and by what I was thinking, I could not bring back anything. And the leader replied, "You shall be our people's new leader, for you have brought back the most precious thing of all, the gift of vision for a better future." If together we would pray the antiphonal prayer. Spirit of God, open our eyes that we may see the future to which you call us.
Spirit of God, open our ears to each other, that we may listen to each other's hearts.
Spirit of God, expand our minds, that if necessary, we may embrace change with hope and spirit. Spirit of God, do not let us cling to the old, the safe. Spirit of God, help us to be open to all options and discussions. Spirit of God, may the common good inspire our choices. Spirit of God, may we learn from our congregations who have renewed their lives. Spirit of God, may our parishioners who have gone before us help us find the way. Let us pray. Gracious God, you have called us to be collaborators with you and with one another in creating a world of compassion and justice for all. May the oil which we were anointed in baptism and confirmation strengthen us for the journey ahead. And may we be open to your Spirit working in us to find new and creative ways to further your gospel. Amen. I would now like to welcome up Evelyn Westman for a summary of the Council's deliberation process up to this point.
Hello, all you beautiful Catholics. It's so nice to be in a room full of people that are believers in the Catholic faith. My task is to give you the basics about our united Catholic community. the Pastoral Council and our deliberations up until tonight's meeting. I was asked to be on the council by Father Mark. The sole purpose of this particular parish council, what's the matter, Kathy? You can't hear? Good enough? Too much? Okay, I will start over because there is a request in the back for me to start over. All you beautiful Catholics. My task is to give you the basics about our United Catholic Community Pastoral Council and our deliberations up until this meeting. I was asked to be on the council by Father Mark. The sole purpose of this particular pastoral council is to determine and take an objective look at the tri-parish partnership and discern if we have a long-term future. Our collective answer was, yes, we do, but with the very real possibility that we would need to do things differently, radically differently. We opted to change our collective name to the United Catholic Community in place of the generic tri-parish community. The purpose of this was to to make us all aware that we have a Catholic identity. We have met approximately 21 times since November 2020. Not that I've been counting or anything. The discussions are always civil and thought-provoking, and dare I say, sometimes depressing. The Pastoral Council toured all 3 parishes. We discussed some financial information, the priest shortage in the Diocese of Erie, and also the priest shortage nationwide. Also, we talked about mass attendance numbers and parish demographics. After much prayer and thoughtful discussion, we are proposing that we create, and I'm going to read this verbatim, a singular, vibrant community with one Eucharistic worship space that respects the traditions of service embodied in all our parishes. In layman's terms, one physical church and one campus. And remember, this is a proposal and not a final decision. Our pastoral council sees it as an opportunity to build up our congregation while owning our individual parish histories and maintaining pride in everything Sacred Heart of Jesus, St. Paul, and St. Andrew have accomplished in all their storied histories. Thanks for listening. Aaron Kerr will now talk about demographics. Oh, the fun demographics.
Thank you, Evelyn. And can you hear me? Okay, very good, thank you. Demographics. We're going to think about 3 sets of demographics that are all sort of interrelated. Interrelated facts. Facts about our 3 churches. Facts about Erie and the Erie region, and facts about the aforementioned priest shortage. So there is no denying that the whole diocese faces these challenges. These are the realities that every church faces in the city, and our whole diocese faces these realities. Our Protestant brothers and sisters face these realities. And so we're in this together, facing the reality of each church, and our mass attendance has been in decline. So facts about the past 11 years. There's a graphic that you got in a letter which demonstrates the decline in mass attendance over that past 11 years. It's there on the screen there. This was a 4-week average of mass attendance taken each year in October. And you can see it starts in 2010. We've pointed out when the partnership started, and we pointed out when COVID hit. It's important for all of us to note that mass attendance has been declining for a long, long time, long before the pandemic, obviously, and even before the abuse scandal. And furthermore, this decline is typical for our region. And the council has determined that this decline means that something has to change in our life together. The next slide demonstrates is a map of the so-called Rust Belt of the United States, all the way up into Wisconsin. Detroit certainly is in there, Columbus, Ohio, Southern Ohio, parts of West Virginia, Pittsburgh, and you can see Erie is starred there, up into Buffalo and so forth. We live in this place where industries that once thrived and frankly brought a lot of Catholic families into places like Erie are no longer here. And these regions called the Rust Belt, who are in the Rust Belt, are now reinventing themselves. And Erie is no exception there, with Hammett Hospital and all the universities here really making a difference in reinventing downtown Erie. So our question is and was, what makes the Catholic Church any different? We have to reinvent ourselves as well. The next slide is Evelyn mentioned depressing, and we, just let me take a moment and say that the council, throughout our deliberations in those 21 meetings, became more and more attuned to the reality of poverty in each church neighborhood. And in Erie is some of the worst among the worst in our nation. You can see that the per capita below poverty level has hovered between 20 and 30% for many, many years. And each church is surrounded by poverty. Each one of our churches is surrounded by poverty. And so we've been very cognizant of that as we've deliberated. The next slide just shows the City of Erie census and demonstrates that the decline in our mass attendance is connected perhaps to the decline of the population of the City of Erie over the last 65 or 70 years. So the City of Erie presently faces decline, has faced decline, and we're talking about the city here, so it amounts to the fact that many of our neighborhood churches in the city were populated by people who moved to what I like to call the two creek areas, Mill Creek or Harbor Creek. And those are great places. I've lived in Mill Creek myself. So we're dealing with a sort of formulation here of the reality we're all facing. So we've talked about the churches, and we've talked about the demographics of Erie, and now we have to talk about pressing concern, which is the priest shortage. So there's not enough priests to go around to 126 parishes in our diocese. Now, we started saying that number. Now, just, 126. So that's the 19th century in terms of our years here. That's a lot of churches. 126 churches. And the number of priests under retirement age in our diocese is shrinking and has shrunk. I guess are there English professors out there? Has shrunk over the years, as we all know. The retirement age in our diocese is a benchmark of 75 years old, but some priests, as you probably know, stay on and serve as pastors. And in addition to their serving longer, which may or may not be a good thing, the numbers of ordained coming in each year has been less and less. So it's just a matter of proportion there. The number of priests coming in is less than the number of priests who retire, die, or leave the ministry altogether. So we have a map here of the Diocese of Erie and all the parishes. And the diocese is responsible for serving Catholics in, here's another number to think about, 13 northwestern counties. So Erie County, and that's where most of us do our living and business and everything else. But 13 other counties, the Erie Diocese is responsible for that many churches in that breadth of region. So these 126 churches are served by the pastors, and only 1/3 of these churches have their own pastor. So that means that 2/3 of the churches, 81 churches, are already partnered like the United Catholic Community. Some have secondary status and are sharing a pastor. Some are mission churches. Now, a mission church is open seasonally, very special occasions, and secondary churches are open for funerals, weddings, and feast days. But neither the mission churches nor the secondary churches are open for weekend masses. So there's a lot of our churches that are already partnered. So if you look at the pie chart there of priests, there are 78 active pastors for 126 churches. 8 of those 78 are over retirement age of 75. 3 are on loan from another diocese. Now, in our deliberations as a council, we would always ask the question, there's an international Catholic community. Why can't we get priests from overseas or other parts of the United States? And we investigated that, and the diocese told us basically this: a pipeline of priests is not available domestically or internationally. So that was sort of the end of that conversation. So in 14 years, there will be less than 50 priests to serve 126 churches. By 2035, the Erie Diocese will have less than 50 priests under retirement age to do the work of 126 churches. So if you look back at that mass attendance average, we have a decline in people going to Mass. We have a decline in priests And then we have all these physical buildings and spaces in neighborhoods that are full of hurting, hungry, poor people. This may not be bad news, but it may be an opportunity. So by necessity, the future Catholic Church will have fewer churches, but by necessity, the future Catholic Church will have parishes that are more uniformly distributed geographically, so that we can say, like, city Catholics like us have to sacrifice some of their church options, some of where they go to Mass, so that rural communities are able to maintain the one church they have within a 50-mile radius. Because that, driving 50 miles is a little bit different from driving down 26th Street, where you have Blessed Sacrament and another church down there and down here. We have concluded that restructuring is the right thing to do. The next slide, you'll see another map of the diocese. And what the diocese looks at is high-density areas where there are a lot of churches. And so that where those lots of churches are, naturally, you want to bring those churches together in order that there's more priests to serve other churches. So multiple worship sites, bottom line here, is costly. And it's costly financially for sure. And throughout this process, we realize it's costly spiritually. And over the next months, we'll explore that perhaps a little bit more. So since we don't walk to church anymore, a bird's eye view would show us that it makes sense to close a lot of parishes. People are driving and commute, and parishes could still be consolidated and leave multiple options for where to celebrate Mass for Catholics. So the slide here is those X's represent the 3 parishes that we represent and indicate our parishes relative to the city, and demonstrate with all those red balloons around that all 3 of those parishes could conceivably be closed, because all those other balloons are other Catholic parishes. The council has been adamant about maintaining ministries to the poor in the neighborhoods that we have been celebrating the Eucharist in. This maintenance of those ministries to the poor do not need a worship site to be right there. But these ministries of the poor would certainly need to be maintained and would continue. I'd like to call Donna Carlino for the financial overview.
Good evening, everyone. Nice to see such a good attendance here this evening. Over the past many months, Council has worked collaboratively and through some difficult conversations, I might add, to form a mission statement that we could use to govern how we would proceed. That included a high-level review of the overall financial health of all 3 parishes. We're sensitive to and understand that when we start talking about money, it can be emotional to people, because we acknowledge that those funds within the parishes represent the generosity, hard work, sacrifices, and that so often our giving has been driven by our commitment to our specific parish. So what our review has been so far is the last 2 fiscal years for each parish, Those would be years ending June 30th, 2020 and 2021. During these periods, our offertory declined across all parishes, but so did our operating expenses. While we acknowledge some of these changes may be related to COVID, we should not ignore the growing trends of our dependence on parish activities, bequests, gifts, and changes in the market values of our investments to sustain our operations and our ongoing expenses. In the December 6th listening session, we'll dive a little bit more into that and answer the questions that we're hoping you'll send in regarding parish finances. To accomplish this, please take the time. We hope to get some more information out to you. Take the time to send the questions to the email address that you've been provided. We thank you for your patience, for your attendance, for your support as we work through this process. Like I said, the conversations haven't always been easy conversations, yet I think that we have worked together great as a group and accomplished great things. So please be patient, please participate, and please send in your questions. Father Mark will now share gospel messages that have guided our work thus far.
I would like to say that we did receive already a number of questions regarding finances, which are clearly understandable. People know that we're renting out buildings, we have Italian festivals, we have bequests. What happens to that money, where all that goes? Those things will be discussed at that December 6th, as opposed to going through the mind-numbing numbers at this meeting. Nobody's been turning my pages, so I'm not sure where we are. One of the things that I want to emphasize is that the demographics are saying that we need to do something. That's the point of tonight, is to make that case. But I also want to say that I think that it's important for us to remember that, as painful as that may be, there's another reason why we're doing this, is because the gospel commands us to do it. If we pay attention to the gospel passages, Jesus is pretty clear about how he wants to operate. And downsizing, simplified life is at the very core of the gospel message. And so when Jesus was doing his recruiting, he had a wealthy young man come up and was very eager to follow and wanted to know what it would be, what it takes to get into the kingdom. And Jesus' response to this man was that he should sell what he has, give it to the poor, and then come follow him. And that was a charge not just simply for this man who had many possessions. No doubt it was a personal challenge to him, but I believe that it's inherent in the message for all of us as disciples. Because when we think of ourselves, we say that we're disciples, but we attend Mass. I'm not sure that we're as thoroughly invested in discipleship as much as the apostles were. And so when Jesus was going on doing his recruiting, he was telling people to leave their boats, leave their business, take no money, no extra food for the journey. You traveled light. And the reason for that is to ensure that the disciples, the apostles, understood dependency, that they would be dependent upon God, be dependent upon the charity of others. And that was something that was going to allow them to be far more effective in communicating this message gospel than if they had all their gear with them and all their protection and everything else. So Jesus is calling us as disciples to practice the same type of detachment as what he wanted for his apostles. And I think that we as a church have kind of missed that. I think that we felt that that was good for a starting point. These guys needed to travel around and travel quick, so they needed to be traveling light. But I believe that that gospel message is for all of us. And unfortunately, we've ended up rather top heavy. So Jesus said of his own ministry, the Son of Man has no place to rest his head. And that's not just an occupational hazard for an itinerant preacher. that is walking around, has no place to call his home, is he didn't want any of his disciples to be calling it a home. Because even though he was fully human, he was not of this world. And he said the same of his disciples. You are no more of this world than I am of this world. We can live in it, but we shouldn't become so attached to it that it slows us down and prevents us from doing the larger ministry. So if you take a careful read of the gospel and you compare it to what the structure and the hierarchy and the empire of the Catholic Church, it's really kind of disheartening to think that we've perhaps gone quite off the beam. Now, that's not to say that the church and its infrastructure hasn't done good and wonderful things. We're here as a testimony that we have benefited from such structure and investment. But in reality, it is probably a little bit top-heavy now. In our particular sector of the world, we're realizing we cannot support this, and it's no longer serving the purposes that it once did. So I think that we have to more carefully embrace the gospel message to know that our downsizing is going to hurt, but really it's probably going to bring us closer to living the gospel more authentically. The church structure is kind of living on borrowed time. It is collapsing before our eyes. And we can be very heartbroken over it, and certainly we do feel pain of loss. But I don't know that the Holy Spirit is done with this yet. He needs us to move forward. Jesus said of his disciples, anyone that keeps looking at the past and worrying about what you did in the past is not fit to be my disciple. And that sounds very harsh, and that's not to say that we can't grieve what we need to let go of, but we really have to make sure that we do look forward. And I think with looking forward, there is a lot of hope out there. And as long as we are grieving too much and suffering too much of attachment, it's going to make that process all the more difficult. In the cover letter, we said that we were going to provide kind of a rationale for consolidation. So Aaron Kerr said in the one slide, he didn't say it, but the slide said it, demographically, it would almost make sense to close all three parishes. If all we're focused on doing is going to Mass on a particular Sunday, we've got plenty of churches in the city that will provide a Mass at the time that we probably want. It may not be our preferred thing, but there are many options out there. And if all we're concerned about is going to Mass, we may as well close all three because we need to find other options for our operation. But the question is closing three really what we want to do? And I'm going to suggest you're here because that isn't what you want to do. So what we're proposing is a consolidation down to one as opposed to closing all three. So if you're going to close one of the reasons why we're doing this is because we believe this mission statement, even though it was formed by a committee and seems to be a bit wordy, we're going to become one single vibrant community that's Eucharistic-based, worship in one site, and protect the service traditions of all three parishes. We're trying to cover as many bases as possible, the things that we think are important. But I think the key thing is there's an enthusiasm to become a community that has a future. And I think we're all here because we've been part of a community that's been suffering and kind of dying out. So if we're going to go down to one parish, then the question is, well, which parish do you keep? And how do you figure that one out? Logic would say, well, you could do a matrix and you could do a list of pros and cons and say, what are the things that we like about this parish and what are the things that we need to fix in that parish? And you could come up with a matrix, if you will. But the reality is many of the things that are objective are almost things that are almost irrelevant at a point. If we don't grow our numbers, any of our three parishes have seating capacity to handle our needs, or even the parking, and you can fix air conditioning. So the question of nuts and bolts, what do you like, is almost irrelevant. Instead, it becomes far more subjective. I like this aesthetic. I like this particular history. I want these things. And you cannot make a comparison of subjective things to a consensus. And so I propose there's another approach to this, because we could get bogged down of voting for what parish we want to keep. I think there's another look at this, and it's kind of also depressing. And so the depressing approach is any parish that we do not get rid of, we get stuck with. And we already recognize that we cannot maintain these wonderfully built buildings because slate roofs, multi-story masonry, boiler systems, stained glass windows and wood frames, the list goes on and on. The maintenance costs long-term of facilities like that are beyond our budget. We simply cannot maintain those facilities. And so the question is, what do we do? And so we need to be able to unload facilities that we're not using because we already have enough blight in our community. And so if we have an opportunity to repurpose a facility, we really need to look at that quite seriously. Because if you don't, then you're stuck with an albatross that can cripple us. And so if we think that we're simply going to put these things in the market and sell them, we need to have another serious look at that. Because when you can't just find out how many people are willing to buy it until you're ready to put it on the market, and the diocese will not let you put a church on the market until it's closed. It's a catch-22. But the real estate people will tell you there's not a huge market in Erie for facilities that have churches, rectories, schools, and social halls that are filled with asbestos, that have aging everything. So there really isn't that much of a market out there. So it would be nice if we could be able to sell our facilities and transfer that cash and buy and build the perfect whatever it is that we need, but that's not realistic. So the reality is if we can find people that can use these facilities, that might determine what parish you keep and what parishes you give away. And that comes to the last slide of donation. It'd be nice to be able to sell facilities, but people aren't going to be buying these facilities. But if we find people that are able to use these facilities in serving the ministries that we talk about, serving the poor, the donation factor helps us get past hanging on to things that we ourselves can't maintain. And it also gives us the advantage of giving an incredible gift to the larger community. Donation sounds hard because we think that we have this wonderful treasure, but it's only worth what somebody's willing to pay for it or what somebody can do with it. And so if we have the opportunity to donate these facilities to serve the poor, I think we're pretty much living that gospel passage that says, go sell what you have, give it to the poor, and then come follow me. To further on explanation of those possibilities, I would now like to ask Phil Temple to come up to discuss our proposal.
Good evening, everybody. As you've heard from the previous presenters, Council has spent a lot of time going over the data, the information, the issues. After many long discussions of this data, which has been shared with you, and issues we face, we formed the following mission statement upon which our proposal is structured: to become one single vibrant community with one Eucharistic worship location that respects the spirit of service embodied in our parishes. Structuring this proposal, and I want to emphasize it is a proposal, that final decisions have not been made, required Council to consider a multitude of issues that our community would face moving forward. These issues include long-term maintenance, needed repairs, insurance, the potential of real estate taxes being levied on unused properties, limited marketability of parish properties, and obligations of existing leases. With these in mind, along with a total decline in attendance of over 60% since 2010, and the growing priest shortage, the two most important issues we face: we structured our proposal with the following goals. First, raise Sacred Heart School in the future as it cannot be practically repurposed. Second, to repurpose St. Paul's School, auditorium, rectory, and other contiguous properties, they would be donated to the Sisters of St. Joseph Neighborhood Network, who have been providing numerous services to the needy in Little Italy for many years, as Christ and the Church have challenged us. Third goal, to repurpose St. Andrew's School, rectory, both currently under lease and remaining outbuildings. They would be donated to the Erie Family Center, currently serving those in need in Erie and the Erie area. We've had exploratory discussions with these two agencies to gauge their interest. Both have indicated a desire to explore these proposals as a means of enhancing their services and increasing the number of people in need who they serve. Fourth, maintain the Italian Festival under the nonprofit status of the Neighborhood Network, with proceeds to be used by the Neighborhood Network to support their services in Little Italy. The fifth goal, merge 3 parishes into a new parish under a new name to be housed at 816 West 26th Street. And the last goal, we would unite and realign all the ministries and organizations of these 3 parishes to continue their mission of service and inclusion, as well as expand opportunities for ministry with the Erie Family Center, the Neighborhood Network, and other similar agencies in our area. We know this is and will be a very emotional process for all of us, as well as challenging. Let us embrace this opportunity to build a new, stronger, and more vibrant church as Christ asked of us. Our next presenter is Kate Fatter, whose topic is, "Do You See What I See?"
I'm here to ask us to focus on the possibilities of what God might be calling us to do. We need to stop worrying about self-preservation and start to think about evangelization. We need to be mission-oriented. And we have to be willing to come together into a single, vibrant community. We need to point ourselves in a direction, and in the meantime, get a vision. Pope Francis is hoping for a church caring for people. What would happen to our hearts when we are drawn into others' lives? We need to be mission-oriented. We need to be caretakers of all of God's children. We need to stop worrying about self-preservation and continue to focus on the needs of others outside of our little circle. To quote one of the sisters, "I'd rather see the gospel than hear it." We could be the people St. Francis referred to when he said, "Preach the gospel at all times, and if necessary, use words." This isn't complicated. Are we willing to place ourselves in the middle of a hurting neighborhood? There's a small band of sisters working in Little Italy who need reinforcements. In fact, they need an army, hands and feet to join with them in their work. When we look at Jesus, he did not remain in one town. He was moving from place to place, from need to need. His presence could be seen and felt among the people. On the same vein, Jesus sent his disciples out. That's how the gospel message spread. The book of Acts comes to an end with chapter 28. But really, it's just the beginning, and we are being sent out as well. We are Acts 29, if we decide to accept the challenge. I can see corporal works of mercy happening all the more when we join forces with ministries that are already happening in the neighborhood network. Can you imagine this happening? I'd like to give you a couple of examples of people making a difference in their neighborhood. The corner of 7th and Raspberry is pulsing with activity. It's the Erie Family Center. They are meeting the needs of 400 families in our city and county. The Family Center is providing supplies, counseling couples, single parents, and even grandparents, helping them better the lives of themselves and their children. The place has a heartbeat. On the second floor of the rectory, there are counseling sessions for people with eating disorders. The center's next project, if they get room for it, is to help unwed mothers. There's a food pantry that currently serves about 80 families. This may not be church doing all this, but these are folks who are doing the corporal works of mercy. There's the Church of the Covenant, which is being the hands and feet of Christ. Their members discovered that they had a treasure in their church. It was a Tiffany stained glass window. They sold it at auction in New York City for a small fortune. Every penny was earmarked for outreach ministries to be used to help people in downtown Erie, as well as programs for Gannon students. They're providing meals and overnight shelter in bad weather. In conclusion, are we, as a united Catholic community, are we ready to step out of our boat and believe that God will hold us up? Can we be a unified church caring for people?
I know this is challenging. When the committee first started, we went through the stages of community growth. You have pseudo-community, we're playing along, we go to each other's spaghetti dinners. Then you go into chaos. You face the facts. It hits the fan. The next phase is emptiness, where you start to realize that there aren't easy answers. And maybe you're not going to get what you want. And there's an opportunity to start talking more honestly about the hurt without being judged, without it becoming argumentative. And then you go on to becoming a community that is an ongoing process. You just don't overnight get there. Our council has gone through that. And I have no doubt, I should say, we're in that. We got to the chaos. I think we're at the emptiness phase. And the purpose of tonight was to invite you to get into the chaos. Because we've been into the pseudo community. That's a nice, comfortable place, but obviously we can't stay there. And so we introduce you to the chaos and know that it's going to be hurtful. But I think that when we discuss things and we bear with it, we'll get to the point where we can become a community. And that is my hope. Because in reality, some people are not going to want to do this, that, or the other thing. They'll find their own place to go, just as many other people have already done. But I think in the midst of the chaos and the struggle, we do form a community. And that is the key piece here. Because if we don't form this community that is going to do something different with our Catholicism, we're just stuck where we are, which isn't really working if we pay attention to the numbers. So I encourage you to sit with this. We have a couple of sessions planned to start the feedback process and to pray about this. So we encourage you to, after this, the presentation, the council members here who have the name tags will be available for one-on-one conversations. Hopefully you've been writing down your thoughts and comments on paper. You can hand those either to the council member or some of the students that are going to be circulating around that will capture your thoughts in writing if you don't want to write them down yourself. But we're going to collect all that information, and that's going to help fuel our conversation for the next meetings. So we have 2 meetings planned, one on Monday, November 22nd, and then one on December 6th. Both of those will be at Sacred Heart in their auditorium at 7 p.m. So just know that you can continue to send in your feedback via email or mail them in or give us a call. We're going to capture some of this stuff tonight as well. This video or this presentation has been recorded, and we'll get it eventually edited and posted so people who have not been present tonight can see it as well, or if you want to revisit it, you certainly can. And so I thank you for your presence and your prayerful presence here this evening, and I'll now invite the Pastoral Council to kind of scatter to the different areas of the room and hear your thoughts. Thank you.